30+ years of experience working in the private and public government sectors, from the UW-Madison to the Kellogg's Foundation, from small mom and pop shops to Fortune 500 companies. She also has years of public speaking, leading, and facilitating meetings of 5 to 1,000. So I think we fall in that area. All right, I'm going to lay out the rules for you. First, I'm going to introduce the candidates that were able to attend. All candidates were invited. 2 of the candidates had previous engagements and were unable to attend. Okay. We've got Frank Sauter, who's running for town chairman, Rob Martins, who's running unopposed, and Josh Hayes, Bonnie Wilson, and Larry Call were unable to attend this evening. Although Larry may be here, he has a meeting at the village, he may be here at the time. Okay. The rules are going to be this. We're going to give each candidate 5 minutes to introduce themselves. We got the speaker sign up. There's really no time limit, although we would like you to keep it down to 3 minutes per question. All right. Once everybody on the list has asked a question, if that spurs an idea in your head to ask an additional question, once all those people have asked a question, we'll open the floor up to further questions. Questions are only going to be on issues that the board has the ability to legislate, and we will have absolutely no personal attacks. Thank you. Ollie?
Good evening, and thank you all for coming tonight and taking some time out of your busy schedules. I'm going to do my best to help facilitate this. It's been a while. And I do want to thank all 3 of the candidates that did show tonight for volunteering your time and for joining us to help answer any questions and help set the pace for the upcoming spring election. And what I'm going to do is invite each one of you up, and I do believe that Mr. Paulson will do the timing, but I gave you each 5 minutes. So should we just start with anybody, or do we want to rush going, or does it not matter?
You mind if I just sit here?
If that's what you choose to do, you can sit and you can go first, Mr.
I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for attending tonight. Obviously, this is new to me. I've lived here all my life, 62 years. I grew up on a farm here. I was a police officer for about 30 years, retired from that in 10, but I've done insurance with one company for 33 years. I worked in management. That's, in a nutshell, my wife Donna is sitting right here. We've been married for 30 years, and I hope to be able to serve you our township. I care very much about it.
Hi everybody, I'm Rob Martins. Many of you already know me, many of you don't. I was born and raised here, went to high school here, graduated from UW-Whitewater with a bachelor's degree, and then I moved out of state for 35 years. I received my master's degree at a university in St. Louis where I lived for 24 years, and I lived in various other places, including China for 3 years during my career. So I spent 40 years in supply chain, sourcing and supply chain, the last 20 in management positions. So I've got a lot of leadership, a lot of background in management. I have, in my roles, I have negotiated multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts, which I think will be a strength, being on the board, making sure our suppliers are giving us the services and the support that we've contracted for. I've also managed teams of up to 30 people, so being on the board is something that I feel I'm well qualified for. I spent 2 years, my last 2 years before I retired, on the board of directors, the voluntary board of directors for the UW-Whitewater Supply Chain Department. And I retired 2 years ago in 2021. I live out at Blue Spring Lake, and I've been back in town I've owned the property since 2018. I'm very pleased to see all of you here, very open to hear any questions that you have. One of the things that we're hopeful, at least I'm hopeful of, and I think both of these gentlemen agree with me, is we need a lot more transparency on the board than we potentially have gotten lately. And there's several other things that I hope to accomplish on the board. I think a lot of them will come out with your questions. So feel free to answer any questions you want. You'll get straight answers from me. I won't be able to answer all of your questions. This will be, haven't served on a town board before, so there'll be a learning curve. So hopefully we'll have patience as well. But I think a new set of eyes, new sets of more than one set of eyes is probably something that we're looking forward to. So thank you for being here.
Josh Gajewski, appreciate everybody being here again tonight. Obviously, it is potentially the first town candidate forum. It's nice to see as many people turn out as what has been as well for Blaine and Holly for organizing it. I grew up in Palmyra, graduated from Palmyra High School in 2001, attended WCTC, graduated from the metal fabrication and welding program there. Spent about a year or so in robotic and TIG welding before moving into the public sector 20 years ago or so. Spent 4 years of that time as a utility operator and public works operator. Moved into a department level supervisory position as a superintendent. In the last 7 years, I've spent as kind of an administrative position as utility director, again on the municipal level. So. My wife Lindsay and I live on the south end of Highway H, south of the village here, and we've been there since 2010. We've got 2 young daughters who attend Eagle Elementary. Ultimately, I'm hopeful to be able to contribute to the town, make sure that the future of the town is as bright as it was when I was a kid here. Above and beyond that, with my experience in municipal operations, capital project planning, budgeting and those types of things to contribute in a meaningful way to town board and the town residents.
Thank you. I did want to clarify one thing before we do open up for questions. We do have 3 seats open, and 2 of them are opposed and 1 of them is unopposed. Frank Sauter is running against the incumbent Larry Cow, who may join us later. Rob Martins is running unopposed for Supervisor 1 seat, and Josh is, I apologize, I can't pronounce your last name. Josh G is running against, for Supervisor 2 position, and he is running against the incumbent Bonnie Wilson, who also couldn't be here tonight.
She's not the incumbent.
She's not an incumbent. Thank you for clarifying that for me. In my research, that's what I found. So that seat is opened, and those 2 are vying for it. Thank you for the correction and clarification. So with that, we just kind of wanted to lay out a picture of what seats they're running for and who's doing what here. So I guess now we will open up the floor for questions. And I was asked to remind that the questions that are to be asked are to be things that they can legislate from their seats, from the board, and not necessarily personal or attacking questions, correct? Thank you. So if you'd like to ask a question, we're going to ask that you'll raise your hand, state your name and your address and or the municipality you are from. So who would like to go first?
Suzanne, you're up first.
Oh, he thinks there's a list.
Oh, there's a list you want to follow. I apologize. So you want me to follow the list? Okay, so we're going to go on, I'm sorry, we'll come up to you next. We're going to go on the list in the order that they're on there, and after everybody that's signed up to ask a question, then we'll take further questions from anyone. Suzanne? Yes.
Hi, you wanted me to stand? I'm Suzanne Stanford, I live on Tamarack Road, and my question is, as I understand it, we ask 1 candidate and not all 3, although I'd be happy to ask all 3.
It wasn't real clear, it was just ask questions that pertain to...
Right. Well, maybe all 3 of you would like to answer this, but it was directed especially to Josh, because I believe you worked for Public Works, right? So when you worked in that capacity, I can certainly understand why you supported annexing Blue Spring Lake into the village. But now that you'll be potentially working on behalf of the town, do you see that decision any differently, since they're, what is it, half of our tax base?
I think it's a huge issue that everybody in the town needs to be aware of. Ultimately, annexation is something that is borne by the residents of the community, and as such, I think moving forward, whether it's sanitary sewer or road concerns or anything else that they have out there, needs to be something that this board or any other future board needs to pay attention to, because it is a financially important piece of how the town operates at this point.
Go ahead.
We also had, I live on Blue Spring Lake, and it's a topic that's very important to me as well. There would have to be a tremendous financial or economic reason to do it, and it would, to be okay with annexation. Still have to learn a lot about it. I wasn't around when the prior attempt happened, but I have to learn all the reasons, the pros and cons back then, assess them now. But it would have to be a very strong case for it to happen. I believe in the town. I believe in the tax base of the town. And you're absolutely right. It's a high percentage of the tax base for the town. So there would just have to be an overwhelming rationale, economically, financially, et cetera, to move forward with that, in my opinion.
Of course, I agree with everything Rob said there. The people that reside and own homes and property out on the lake, their opinions count. They're an important part of the township, and we look forward to hearing from all the residents out there, including the part-time residents. But obviously, we certainly do not want Blue Spring Lake to be annexed to the village.
I'll add one thing. I will be open-minded on all. I didn't want to make it sound like I was closed-minded on it. I'll be open-minded on every single issue. It's not my opinion, it's your guys' opinion, gal's opinion, and whatever the economic aspects of it. So if all of that points to doing it, then I'm open-minded on it, but it would have to, like I said, be overwhelming.
Thank you. Did that help?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Next on the list, we have Brian F. Brian?
Okay. Well, Brian Paulson, I live on County E north of town. Kind of a two-part question. Explain to us how you understand the 2023 budget that was passed, the challenges in that budget, and then based upon that, when you get it, if you get in there, what are your priorities as far as moving forward beyond that?
And you're directing that to all of us.
Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. I can't answer your question with probably the answer that you're looking for. I don't have firsthand knowledge of the budget. I've looked at it online, but without it being able to dig into it, ask a lot of questions, find out what this is, what that is, because some of the categories in that budget are not very clear. So one of the first things we would need to do is dig into the budget. I would support an audit of prior budgets, of all of the financials, to take a look at where are we, assess it where we're at, and then determine. A lot of the budget depends on our priorities, to your second part of the question too. And I think those priorities are going to be driven by our constituents, the residents, and what are their priorities, along with whatever's left over. I mean whatever the current priorities are. We'll have to reassess and reprioritize things before we can really give you a solid answer on that. I'm just trying to be honest with you. Need to learn a lot more about it.
With myself, I agree, of course, with what Rob said, and I feel in the first 30 to 60 days, if the three of us get in, we're going to have to sit down and really look at everything. We have to, because we've really been in the blind. We ask questions and don't get a response. I called, asked questions, no return phone call on some of these issues. So we need to move forward, but that is something we're going to have to look at least in my opinion, in the first 30 days to 60 days to see exactly where we're at.
Thanks for the question. I guess priorities, in my mind, revolve around keeping the future budgets for the town in a manner where it's static and stable. Looking at what was discussed in November this past year about exceeding the levy limit, obviously the town is in a position where it needs more funding to be able to keep up with the existing services that it provides to its residents. As things move forward and the levy exceedance was denied by the people that were at the levy meeting, ultimately funds were kind of withdrawn from LGIP as well as from the road maintenance fund. So the existing board that is in place today had wants and needs as far as where they saw services going and what those costs were. I think one of the first things that residents need to understand and be aware of is what that budget was as it sat. Why did the funding, the request for funding come up, and where else are there funding sources available? Can we get additional funding through grants? Are there other sources of revenue that we're just not capturing within the existing revenue stream? And additionally, where can we cut expenses? Obviously, I have posted on social media for anybody who's seen those. One of my primary focuses is the roads within the town. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, asset that the town maintains. And it is costly, and the costs are going up. The past 2 years, the cost of road construction has almost doubled. And it's something that if we don't keep pace with, is going to drown us. As a set of residents, whether you live out on Hooper Road, or you live on South Shore Drive, or somewhere else in between, roads are roads, and they need to be maintained. I've done preliminary reviews going through the Whistler road ratings, trying to drill into some of the information that the town has self-rated as far as where the roads are, and what those costs look like. And even before there were budget cuts to be able to backfill the budget for 2023, in my own opinion, we were $200,000 short in what we were funding road construction. And that's on a conservative, no cost increase, no further deterioration. Every single maintenance application that we could provide to the roads that we have is able to be done in a timely manner. So the scary part of that is $875,000, which over a 20-year lifespan of what the roads are generally assumed to be, 875 is the number that we're looking at. So to go from 200 to 875 is a huge number. It's something that town residents aren't going to be able to afford on their own. So we need to initially look at the budget, figure out where those expenses are, figure out where we can plug holes, and do maintenance work while we continue to plan for the years upcoming. Make a plan, stick with it, figure out where funding sources are applicable to them, and then execute those when those funding sources are available.
Thank you, and that was just on time, I heard that. The next person on the list is, it looks like Don Johnson or Dan Johnson?
Dan Johnson. Dan Johnson, Bluebird Ridge, Palmyra. There's been talk over the years, or just discussions about a 5-person board. I just wanted to get your take on, what do you think the pros are, what are the cons? Is it something, that will be, somebody may move towards in the next years? I know you've got a lot going on right now, just if, you get elected, being on a new board, but just kind of want to get your take on it.
First of all, I'm in favor of a 5-man board, 5-person board, I should say. There will be more access for the town residents to the town board, having 5. There's this constant problem of having a quorum of the board members, which is a violation of the law. Example, Barry comes up to me and is complaining about something on the road where he lives, and I want to go pick up Rob, hey, let's go up and take a look at this. Well, technically, we can't do that because we're a quorum, because there's only 3 of us. If we have a 5-member board, we can do that. I think we'll be much more of a asset to you folks if there's a 5-person board. It costs a little more. These are, paid positions. However, we budgeted, I believe, $20,000 or more for lawyer fees next year. Well, we don't have to keep spending and spending and spending on lawyer fees, we can take that money and easily pay 2 more residents to be on our board.
I fully support going to 5 or whatever number we would determine is the right number for the reasons Frank said, but I also view it from a fairness, if that's the right word, from a, you can't have necessarily, it's a lot easier to have a broader opinion, a broader variety of opinions when you have 5 instead of just 3. If you have a couple people that are always aligned, it's very tough to have an alternative opinion in there. If you go to 5 or whatever the right number is, you get more opinions on there, you get more background, more ability to work together. It's just not, like I said, I think it's a broader, more fair type of board. It also allows the board, right now, to Frank's quorum question, you can't really have committees to look into things, look at issues, look at priorities. With a 5 or whatever the number is, member board, you can have subcommittees of 2 that take this project or this proposal and take a look at it and bring that back to the board. We don't have that today. So I'm fully supportive of taking a look and seeing it. Well, I'm sure it's possible. Well, what does it take? How long does it take? And how do we move forward with it to expand the board? Absolutely.
We'll let Josh go.
Fair enough. Same kind of opinion. I would favor a 5-person board for the fact that you have more opportunity for people to be involved. Whether or not, and this is something I've started to look into, but whether or not those positions would all be elected at large, meaning from wherever within the town, or if there would be the ability to elect a certain number of them based on wards in which you live, which again speaks to the idea of having a more geographically diverse, I get it, it's the town, but there are different areas with different interests, and I think it would be something to potentially provide an advantage to the town is to have, those additional independent voices and have a better contact point for residents with, people that were elected to the board. There's a timing aspect that happens to all of that with statutory requirements on when an ordinance could or should be passed to make sure that it follows suit with election patterns and that type of thing. So it may be something that, although it's on the mind of whoever is on the new board, that it might have to sit for 12 to 14 months to make it, sequence in with the next actual election cycle of the people who are on board. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, okay, let's say the whole entire board changes. We're all 3 new, we have to learn. Okay, we're sitting out here, it's a brand new board. If you have every other year, somebody's always being elected, at least somebody's been on that board to help the new people get started. If that makes sense.
Also, what you're saying is, whereas all 3 positions are up for election right now, if we went to 5, we'd stay.
Right, so if
Yes.
there's 2 more people sitting here, 3 of us would be up 1 year to the next. 3, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Gentlemen. Next on the list is Irene B.
Irene Blazkowski, Tamarack Road. You were talking about Barry complaining about Tamarack Road. That's actually me that's going to complain about Tamarack Road. No, one of the concerns that, and I don't mean to just focus on our road. I know Tamarack, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Little Prairie are like V2 most traveled other than State Highway 106 in the town. And for years, we've been having trouble with semi-trucks going down a Class B Tamarack Road highway. And I mentioned this in the past, and my question is, what can you folks do to help alleviate this problem, such as possibly using, hey, I'm from the town board of Palmyra, Sheriff Milbrath, can you help us? Can you put up more signs? We've got speeders, you know, all of those problems we have on this road and we have had on the road for many years. And it just seems to be kind of, well, there's nothing we can do about it type, you know, just ignored or not ignored, I don't mean to be derogative, but it just seems to be a problem that doesn't go away. So what would you folks do about that issue?
One moment before we do respond, we did have a constituent ask if you could speak louder because we don't have microphones.
Sure.
So thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, having been a police officer, you need to call the sheriff's office. You can call us, but we're gonna call the sheriff's office. I've got constituents complaining of speeders out on Tamarack Road, specifically near this location, your address, okay? But you have to pick the phone up and call. I can also call, but it's gotta come from you, not just me. Oh, that's Sauter calling again.
No, agreed.
You know, but everybody, you have to call. That's the first thing you have to do. Now, reference your road. Now, maybe there's somebody that can help me out with this. I thought they made Tamarack Lane. Didn't they make Tamarack no semis? Isn't that why S&R has to go out H all the way to Bluff to get their feed truck over there?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm with Blaskowski. All of a sudden, the last couple of weeks, I've just seen a lot of semi-traffic that doesn't belong there. It doesn't look like it's coming from S&R either.
No. And it's ruining, you know, we talk about road maintenance and costs. That was $96,000 to pave that new up to like lanes. And that's being ruined right now along with the current road bed with all of these semis coming with the thaw and the freezing and the weight of the trucks. And I mean, I totally agree. It's a mutual thing that I call the sheriff and, you know, work with the town board. But maybe something from the town board would have a little more clout as well. I don't know. You know,
Thank
help
you.
me solve my
Thank you,
problem.
Irene.
Sorry.
Would you like to address this, Robert, Josh?
Yeah. We dealt with the same thing when I worked in the village as far as truck traffic and trying to direct it, keep them off side streets and that type of thing. Google Maps is great and it's awful at the same point in time because point A to point B is the quickest way and people are gonna follow it if they're not, you know, used to the area and where they should or shouldn't go. We ended up posting no truck traffic, talked with businesses that are along Tamarack Road, which helped. This was 9 or 11 years ago or so. I think also working cooperatively with the town of LaGrange to extend that signage all the way out to 12, because I come in that way every single day. You know, and if people think they can turn there, they're going to turn there. And if there's no posting, and it, you know, for a semi, once you're on Tamarack, you don't have a whole lot of options of where else you're going to go. So I think that's an important piece of it too. And ultimately, when we get to the point of doing road construction, I think we also need to consider, you know, what is the surrounding area and what is it used for, or what could it potentially be used for, and how are we addressing the maintenance for it and any future work to make sure that we don't stick $100,000 into it and then open it up to kind of that traffic liability piece of it. So I agree with Frank as far as the calls. Ultimately, let's face it, we're in the southeast corner of the county, and the county response may or may not be as immediate as we want, but at the same point, making sure that we, as a community, are addressing that with people that can help us, I think it would be important.
Thank you.
I don't really have much to add, other than I agree with both Josh and Frank on this. The only thing I'll add is that when things like this come up and the residents bring it up, we will look into it. We will give you feedback after we've looked into it. And we'll just take them one at a time and deal with them one at a time and involve whoever we need to involve to help the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want
Well,
to say something?
one more thing. You know how they make you've come to these meetings the last year and a half, 2 years, whatever. You know, they make an ordinance for speed limit on a road. They can also post it, make an ordinance for no semi-traffic on the road. Post it and have the county enforce it. Minimum of failure to obey official sign. minimum, probably a 2-point violation. But something like that could be done if there's a ongoing issue, which it sounds like there is. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have on the list Dawn Sauter. Did you want to still ask a question?
I suppose I could, basically. What are your feelings regarding the airport?
Well, my feelings are the airport's a heck of a good asset, and always has been for the community of Elmira. The National Guard uses it, I guess we'll call it for a train stop, but who would not want to keep the airport? We want the airport to stay here. It's been a very good asset as far as I'm concerned, especially if there's an emergency situation. It'd be good to have the airport.
Thank you.
I fully agree. It's been a tremendous asset for us. The one thing, it is theoretically self-supporting, and I would want to make sure if there's any public funds that are used towards it, that there is some sort of payback for the town. And that is in no way saying we're not supportive of the airport, but it is right now, from what I understand, and obviously we'll learn a lot more about it, but it's self-sufficient, and it should stay that way unless there's some sort of direct benefit to the town.
Generally agree with both statements. I know there's an airport commission that is in charge of how the airport operates and who's doing the diligence on their end. But to that point, any good federal grant, knowing how that all works, has strings attached to it. And I think that's something that needs to be better corresponded potentially between the town board and the airport as far as what is the long-term net gain benefit depending on what does or doesn't turn out of some of the grants that they have. And same type of thing, if it's financially solvent, then absolutely keep it, and it brings people into the community and it's positive.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Leslie Ott.
Leslie, I'm on County Road E. I would ask this to all three of you, please. What would you do to promote civility and ensure that you follow the proper protocols for town board meetings?
I'll jump in on this one. You said civility, right?
To promote civility.
Right. One of the things that I very much want to do on the board is to project professionalism, transparency, honesty, gain some trust with the residents. And so that's a very high priority for me. How we go about that is having meetings where we're respectful, where we give feedback, depending on what the rules of these meetings are, which we'll learn. Where we can give feedback, even if it's a time period at the end of a meeting or the next meeting, give feedback on issues that come up. I don't know that we get enough feedback today, but I do know we need to be respectful of our residents, and we need to be professional, and I think we just need to up the game in that area.
I agree with everything that Rob said, and that's one of the main reasons that I'm sitting up here today. The board, from what I've seen, when I started following it about 20 months ago, doesn't seem to let the public speak when they can, or just get along. I mean, some of you have come to these meetings in the last 6 months, and they don't want to get along with the constituents. And I'm not picking on anybody there, it's just an observation. That's one of the main reasons I'm sitting up here. The first board meeting that we have, if I have it my way, at the end of the board meeting, after it's adjourned, will be a session where the community can bring things to us. No decisions will be made. And we have to start out that way. We've got to bring the community together. That electorate meeting they had here in November, where the levy did not pass. The only reason the levy didn't pass is because the people didn't understand it. It wasn't explained properly. I talked to people, okay, let's say your taxes is $5,000 and they wanted to raise the levy 40%. People were thinking that was $2,000 on their whole tax, when all it has to do with is the town of Palmyra taxes. That's how confused people were. And I think you were confused that day too. So that's why I'm sitting up here.
Josh?
Number one, I think anybody who gets elected as the next town board needs to understand that there are people who will come to the meetings who did not vote for them. And that it is what it is. That's part of the way that this whole process works. And change management is not always easy in understanding that people do have different views and they have different priorities depending on where they live, what their, call it social disposition is, whether they're younger and have families, or older and retired, or part-time residents or full-time residents. I think giving information to people is probably the best agent that we can use. Making sure that people, number one, know what's being discussed, number two, can openly discuss it without, fear of being angry and hostile and starting an argument. The board is charged with making decisions. That is why people elect us. At the end of the day, 100% guaranteed that not everybody in this room is going to agree with every single decision that any board ever is ever going to make. So, from a town board member perspective, is understanding that people may not like the decision that you make, but at the end of the day, you can't have referendums on every single thing that this board needs to do to move business forward. I think having an open resident type of forum, whether it's one Saturday a month or before or after board meetings, is also important. And give people an opportunity who may not be full-time residents or may have other things going on nights of meetings, to be able to still participate during the meeting, leverage technology to a point where you can let people promote into a meeting and give their opinion during public comment or whatever it may be. I think are all important things to make sure that everybody's included, regardless of where they stand on it.
Thank you, Josh. Next on the list, we have Gina Castro.
That's me, hi. Gina Castro, Tamarack Road. I'm new to Palmyra, so I would like to say thank you for having this opportunity for us to come and talk to you and hear your positions on things that are very interesting to hear about. I am a soil and water conservation scientist, but I'll save those kind of questions for future meetings. Right now, what I'd like to know, two-part really, are there currently term limits for the town board? And if there are, what is it? And what are your positions on setting term limits?
There's no term limits as far as I know. Some of you have been around here longer than myself.
It's 2 years at the election.
Well, it's for 2 years, but you can keep getting reelected.
And there are no term limits.
That's correct.
Then what are your positions on the setting of term limits for town board?
I honestly,
I think depending on how the future of the board looks, whether it's a 5-member board or a 3-member board, that could be a potential huge detriment, as it was spoke to before. I work in a community now where there is a lot of aldermanic turnover, and it causes, call it staff members in the overall direction of the community, a hard time to adjust to it, both from a board member standpoint, as well as anybody that's working for the board or for the community. So I think within reason, sitting on the board for 46 years is not something I'm interested in. Hopefully I make it to 86, but in the grand scheme of it, I think there's got to be some rationale behind how long or how short that term limit will be.
Not too much to add to that. He was pretty much spot on. Excuse me. A lot depends too on, are we regularly getting candidates that want to participate? And if we go to the 5-person board, I support what Josh said as well.
Did you want to add anything, Frank?
no,
Thank you, and welcome. I do believe that is the last of the names on the list, so I'm going to open it to the floor. If there's anyone else that would like to ask a question now, if you would just raise your hand, state who you are, and where you're from. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Ron Dragowski, Blue Spring Lake Drive. A question regarding the caucus versus a primary. What your thoughts are in regards to moving towards a primary, if that's even legally a possibility for us. Just seems like in the primary there's a few people representing the voting body, and then we have one person running unopposed, and we have the other position that somebody was eliminated from the possibility of. Just seems to me a primary would involve more voters and maybe make it a little bit more fair for positional votes.
There is a referendum that's going to be on the April 4th ballot as well for the residents to decide whether we stay with a caucus or go to a primary. So that will be decided by the residents on the April 4th ballot.
Will I shut my mouth?
No, that's a good question, good question.
It's a binding referendum, whatever it is, it's binding. But most townships, I guess, are going this other route. I guess it just makes more sense.
And there are pros and cons to both. And I believe the town board at the meeting Monday night said they were going to put out a letter to the residents outlining that there is a referendum, that it is binding, and kind of explaining both. Obviously, we won't see the letter before it comes out. We'll get it at the same time you do. But I believe that letter is going to be coming out from what they said.
Thank you.
Anyone else, questions?
Go ahead. Unless somebody else has one, because this is my second. Regarding the county land use plan, and it's recently come up in our town, and if it comes up again, I guess I'd like to know from all three candidates if you support the Jefferson County land use plan regarding things like changes to, what's the word I'm looking for when you apply for it, like zoning. If there were a change in zoning request, for instance, would you abide by the Jefferson County land use plan that we have previously supported, or not?
First of all, I haven't seen the plan, so I really can't make much of a comment that way. But the other night at the board meeting, they were going to try, didn't they pass something to try and stay in compliance with the county or the DNR on that? But I have not seen it, so I really can't comment.
Blaine, correct me if I'm wrong or not, but if I'm correct, and I may not be, but I thought I read somewhere where the town doesn't have its own plan, it uses the county plan.
That's correct.
Okay. So one of the things,
I can explain it quick.
oh, sure, go ahead.
All right, the town doesn't have a zoning plan, they've adopted the Jefferson County zoning plan and the farmland preservation plan for Jefferson County. So they really don't, the town itself does not have a plan.
Should we review and look at that? Possibly. We'll need to bring it up and take a look at it and just see if we want to make any changes to that. I will say, at least in my opinion, along that same line, I do think growth is important for the town, but it has to be the right growth. And I know under the current zoning, at least I believe so, Blaine, correct me if I'm wrong, that there have been opportunities for potential growth in the past, limited, that have not necessarily moved forward. I think we should take a long look at that from a tax base, et cetera, et cetera. So there are areas, and I don't know if your question was based on growth, potential growth or not, but taken in that direction, I do believe that where good growth, economic, financial, that can help our tax base is something we should look at. Did I say anything correct there as far as?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Kind of echoing the same type of thing. The town uses county zoning, and at this point, if the county zoning is not going to be followed, there better be a really good reason behind it. And in my mind, if it's something where potentially the county doesn't have the information that a local group of residents or board would have, I think the important thing is to relay that to them so that they understand full weight of whatever discussion is going on. Moving away from the county zoning and having a town zoning code is a big commitment, and it's something that residents need to understand what all goes into it. You need zoning administrator of some type, whether it's hired or it's full-time. You need to develop the code. You need to unilaterally enforce that code. You need to have zoning board of appeals in place, so it's a big commitment for the community to go to its own specific zoning code, which is why I think there's one or maybe two towns in the county that have their own. So all of those things, again, if there's something that really dictates that change, then so be it. But I think, again, community involvement so that residents have the opportunity to say, hey, great idea, or what we're doing is important.
Let me just add that, I want to clarify. My comments on growth were within the zoning as it is today. Not saying we're going to go out on our own and not follow the county zoning. Where it's allowed today is what I was referring to.
Thank you. Any follow-up on that, Suzanne?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So how much time are each of you prepared to spend